Can you compare the Legion Go to the ROG Ally? Can you compare the Legion Go to the Steam Deck? Now that the Steam Deck OLED is coming, should I sell my Legion Go? I've had quite a few people reach out and ask me questions about the Lenovo Legion Go, questions like these, especially this week. And I did a video about the Lenovo Legion Go, but that was really just an initial unboxing and first impressions after having only had hands on the device for about 12 hours. Now, at this point, I've had the Lenovo Legion Go for almost 2 weeks. So let's talk about a few things that I missed in my first video and a few things that I may have changed my mind about. I'm going to recommend you check out my buddy The Fox for benchmarks. He really knows what he's doing, and I guarantee he's going to have some fantastic information for you about the Legion Go. Let's start with the stuff that I like about the Legion Go. First off, I love how innovative first-person shooter mode is. If you are unaware or if you missed my first video, basically first-person shooter mode allows you to detach your controllers and then the right controller slots right into this little magnet, which is really cool. And then I can even take off my thumbstick in order to give me a better grip on the controller. Lastly, I flip a little switch and switch it over to first-person shooter mode, and then I'm ready to go. Dude. What? What are you doing? I'm hungry. Have a Factor. I'm sorry. Are you too busy with your holiday plans to cook, but you want to make sure that you're still eating well? With Factor, you get to skip the extra trip to the grocery store, the chopping, the prepping, and the cleanup too, while still getting the flavor and nutritional quality that you need. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes, so all you have to do is heat and enjoy. Plus, they even have calorie-conscious options over the holidays that also taste great. Try delicious dietitian-approved calorie-smart meals with around or less than 550 calories per serving. I like Factor because it lets me cut down on grocery trips and cooking, so I have more time to do some of my favorite things, like make videos for you. I am a huge fan of HelloFresh and have been using them for years at this point, and now Factor is owned by HelloFresh. This gives me a wider array of meal plans to choose from, and there's always something new for everyone. I love switching between HelloFresh and Factor, and now you can enjoy both brands at a discount with me. So if you want to save time and eat great, head to factor75.com or click the link below and use the code NerdNest50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. Again, that's factor75.com, NerdNest50 to get 50% off your first box. In my first video about the Legion Go, I absolutely talked about first-person shooter mode a lot, but I just want to do a quick recap for anybody that hasn't seen that. If you want to watch that full video, there is going to be a link in the description down below after this one. I have to say, I love that they are trying to innovate in ways that nobody else is, but it's not something I see myself ever really using. It's a cool option, but I just can't get my head around where the buttons are. I also feel like I move the mouse whenever I'm shooting, causing me to miss more often than I'd like. It absolutely is more accurate than using a controller, but I am a console player and a controller is still going to be my preference, so I don't see myself using this mode pretty much ever. That being said, there are going to be people that swear by it. They're going to wipe the floor with me in an online shooter, and I'm totally fine with that. But if it were me, buying a machine like this for Valorant isn't really something that's on the table. Not only that, but when you're playing a first-person shooter, the screen is pretty small compared to other desk solutions like a laptop. So you're going to be squinting even though it is an 8.8-inch screen and it is bigger than pretty much all the other handheld PCs out there. When it's down on a desk, the UI stuff is just a little bit too small. Let's talk about that screen. The screen is really great. It's an 8.8-inch 1600p 140 hertz display, and I think the resolution is overkill. I usually just end up running it at 800p, which is half resolution. It makes Windows look kind of like hot garbage on a stick, but the games look totally fine. I'm not sure if Lenovo went with a higher resolution because it would make it easier to get the parts, or if they did it in order to make games that require less power look more crisp, running at higher resolutions. Either way, I don't know that they would actually have saved any money by going with a lower resolution display. And because I have the ability to lower the resolution, at the end of the day, I don't know that it really matters. Moving on to the refresh rate. I've said it before and I will say it again. I am not qualified to really answer this. It goes up to 144 hertz, which may or may not be overkill. When you're playing games at a high refresh rate, it looks awesome, like really awesome. But most of the games that you're playing aren't going to be able to take advantage of that higher refresh rate. So perhaps a variable refresh rate would have been better. I'll talk more about that later on in the video. The color looks great on the screen. I mean, absolutely fantastic. It is one of the best looking screens ever. In fact, until the Steam Deck OLED showed up at my house, I would have said that this is the best looking screen, hands down. And the Steam Deck OLED definitely looks better, but this is bigger. So there's definitely pros and cons to both. And just because the Steam Deck OLED looks better doesn't mean that this doesn't also look fantastic. I am a huge fan of this screen, and I thought 8.8 inches was going to be absolutely crazy, but it's not. This is a really good form factor. When you talk about comfort, there's so many different variables to consider, and different people care more about different things. The Legion Go weighs more than 2 pounds. It's heavy, real heavy. And yes, holding it up, eventually your arms are going to get tired, but nobody really games like that. Most people just sit back on the couch with one hand resting on their knee, so the weight really isn't a factor unless you're transporting. What I find to be far more important when it comes to comfort is the roundness of the back of the controllers. I think Lenovo did a fantastic job designing these controllers, not necessarily the button layout, because I do have notes there, but just the overall shape of the controllers. I've seen a lot of people complain about the sharpness on the front of the controllers, and I gotta say, I'm not feeling that, even a little. It's super comfortable controller to hold, both when they're detached and when they're on the side of the screen. The joysticks feel great. They're Hall effect joysticks, so it should be quite a long time before they start to develop any kind of drift. But even if they do drift over time, it should be relatively cheap to replace them because they're not attached to the device itself. So you could just buy new controllers instead of buying a whole new unit. We'll talk more about that later. I feel like the cap on top of the stick is very comfortable, and the motion of the joysticks as they slide around the ring is extremely smooth. If I were to make a comparison of the face buttons to anything, I would say they feel kind of like a DualSense controller. They're clicky, they feel great. I have no complaints about them. The D-pad, however, I know a lot of people don't like it. Now, I'm not a fighting game guy, so the D-pads are, for me, generally are menu selectors or weapon selectors, and I don't really get into, quarter circle forward and that kind of thing. So I'm not the right person to ask about the D-pad, but overall, I like it. I feel like it's a little bit shallow, but it's clicky and responsive, and I haven't really run into any issues. That being said, if you are somebody who plays lots of Street Fighter or lots of Mortal Kombat, something like that, you might have different standards when it comes to a D-pad, but for me, I think it's a pretty decent D-pad. All right, the detachable controllers. On an episode, a recent episode of the NerdNest podcast, we were talking about the Lenovo Legion Go. I think it was about a week ago, and one of the things that we said was that, Russ from Retro Gamecore came up with this. He said, because these are detachable controllers, one of the things that you can do is sell different controllers, like maybe make one of these that's more for left-handed people, or make one that is more focused with like a different D-pad, or ones that don't have D-pads at all and have trackpads instead. I would love to see what innovations Lenovo could make when it comes to handheld PC inputs, because this isn't attached to their actual system, giving them way more freedom to experiment and giving people less of a barrier to entry in order to try these weird experiments that they might do. I've been playing a few games for emulation on the Legion Go, and I've got it powered by Emudeck. I'm sure that there's no surprise there. For those of you that don't know what Emudeck is, it started out as basically a script to auto-configure your Steam Deck to better deal with emulation. And they've branched out since then to both Mac and Windows. Both of those solutions are currently in early access, so if you want access to those, you have to be a member of their Patreon, at least until they're done with early access, and then everything will be free. There's links down below if you want to check that out. Anyway, I figure it'll have roughly the same performance as the ROG Ally since it has the same chip. Yes, it has faster RAM, but I don't think that's going to have a significant impact. If you are looking for a deep dive on emulation, let me know in the comments, though. I did make a whole ass video about the ROG Ally being hooked up to my arcade cabinet over there, and none of you guys watched it, so I don't know how interested in emulation you are about devices with the Z1 Extreme. Let's move on and talk about a few things that I don't really like about the Legion Go. And number one is the mechanism for detaching and reattaching the controllers. It's just not satisfying. There's some kind of special magic that Nintendo stumbled upon with the way that you attach the Joy-Cons on the Nintendo Switch. The incredibly satisfying click that is so satisfying that Nintendo actually turned it into a UX element of their software is just leaps and bounds better than the feeling of reattaching the controllers to the side of the Legion Go. There's just not a harsh click, and there's been plenty of times where I thought that it was attached, but it wasn't quite attached all the way. It was still working, but it didn't click, and then when I pushed harder on the bottom, it ended up clicking, and that's just not a good feeling. I can see at some point in the future where somebody is going to break their Legion Go because they thought that everything was hooked up right, but it wasn't. But I don't know that Legion had any other choice. I'm sure that if they used the same mechanism that Nintendo did, they would have gotten sued into the ground, and we all know how litigious Nintendo is. So I can totally understand why they didn't try and copy that design exactly. I've seen a lot of people say bad things about the audio on the Legion Go, and I'm not a fan that they have top firing speakers instead of front firing speakers. I get why they did that. They didn't really have much of a choice because it has detachable controllers. There's really no place on the screen for you to put those speakers. So it's understandable, but I would have liked front firing speakers because they always sound better. That being said, I am not an audiophile, and if you are playing a video game and you can hear what's happening in the game, I'm okay with it. I mean, look, you're playing on a small device, so you're going to have a better experience with headphones. I get that it's a metric that people use to compare between different things, but for me, it's good enough. So as far as I'm concerned, yeah, the audio isn't great, but I don't think it's the horrible atrocity that everybody seems to be making it out to be. It's just fine. So I had planned on saying that the Legion R and the Legion L buttons are terrible, but Lenovo has changed them. The left one now brings up Legion Space, and the right one now brings up the menu that you actually want, so that is clearly a win, and someone from Lenovo is absolutely listening. Legion Space seems to be a solution to a problem that is usually a big issue for handheld Windows PCs, and that's that Windows on small screens is bad. It's normally a nightmare. I hate using Windows on the ROG Ally because the screen size is small and the touch targets are kind of hard to hit. On the Legion Go, this isn't really an issue, which is why I don't think that we really need Legion Space outside of that command center that comes up when you press the Legion R button. If you press the Legion L button, it opens up your game selector, but I don't really need that. I'll just launch my games through Steam or the Epic Game Store or Game Pass. What we do need is the Legion R button, which brings up those quick settings, which is where you can easily change brightness or resolution or the refresh rate of the screen. I will say that I ran into an interesting bug, or at least I hope it's a bug, and that is when you go to change the refresh rate of your display from 140 Hertz down to 60 Hertz using the quick settings under the Legion R button, it asks me to plug in my Legion Go. I don't know if this is intended to work that way, but it's really frustrating. I don't want to have to plug in my device in order to change the refresh rate of the screen, and it's clear that that's not necessary because the Steam Deck doesn't make you do that. So I'm hoping that this is just a bug that gets ironed out, and if you're running into this too and you found a solution, let me know in the comments down below that like button. And if you're running into this too and you don't have a solution, make sure that you report it to Lenovo so that they know about it. What I'd really like to see is have the Legion L button remap to the Xbox button and ditch the extra launcher altogether, especially since the launcher has giant ads for games I'm not really interested in. While we're at it, if we're stuck with Legion Space, I would really like better tools for inputs, for adjusting dead zones, for triggers and sticks, but that's all software stuff that can easily be added later, and Lenovo's clearly paying attention to our complaints about Legion Space, so I have high hopes that that stuff is going to change and be fixed down the road. Right now, the Legion Go's gyro only emulates either the left stick or the right stick, and there's currently no good way to emulate a mouse. To me, this is a huge disappointment. I do have a correction that I want to mention real quick. I was wrong about the gyro. I thought that there was only one gyro in the center of the unit, but there's actually 3 gyros in the Legion Go, one in each controller and one in the center unit. But as soon as you detach the controllers, all of the gyro just stops working altogether. I'm hoping that that's something that Legion or that Lenovo will update with Legion Space or software in the future. But right now, the gyro is not a good experience. I would also love it if the folks at Alpaca Labs could help Legion out with their gyro software, because they are the kings of that kind of software right now. And with 3 gyros, it would be ridiculously accurate. At least I think it would. If you don't know anything about Alpaca Labs, I have a video all about their ridiculous controller that I will link at the end of this video, so you can check that out. One thing that has been driving me crazy about the Legion Go is Windows. When I go to log into Windows, sometimes, you know, you swipe up from the bottom, and I don't know why, but Windows will get like stuck halfway up, and the spot where I go to type in my PIN will vanish, and I won't be able to type it in because it's off the screen, and then I have to just reboot the whole system. I don't know what is causing that. I'm assuming it's a bug with Windows and not necessarily Lenovo, but you know, we'll see what happens in the future and if that kind of thing gets fixed. I had a bunch of people ask me about the battery. When I got the Legion Go for my first video, I only had hands-on with it for about 12 hours, and a lot of that was plugged in because I was doing a lot of stuff. I was downloading a bunch of stuff, running a bunch of tests and trying things out, and I didn't have a chance to really test the battery and put it through its paces. I went with a high TDP settings for my battery test. I could have pushed it even harder with custom settings on the Legion Go, but because you get diminishing returns on higher TDP settings, I figured that was a waste since most people won't be using the custom settings. My FPS wouldn't be all that much higher and my battery would take a bigger hit, so I ended up doing performance and efficiency on the Legion Go, and on the ROG Ally, I ran it at turbo, aka 25 watts. Now, under your Legion R button, we have our quick settings, and we have 2 modes, thermal mode or TDP and OS power mode. It might seem counterintuitive, but the OS power mode is actually basically like a balance between GPU and CPU. I ended up talking to the Fox about this, and it turns out that efficiency sends more power to the GPU where big AAA games are going to need it anyway. So if you are playing a game that requires a lot of graphical horsepower, you're going to want to have your OS power mode set to efficiency. And if you're playing a game that is CPU bound, then you're going to want to have it over on performance. So for the Legion Go, on the performance setting for 15 minutes, racing in Forza Horizon 5 at 800p on medium with the screen at 100% brightness, it took the Legion Go from 98% down to 76% in those 15 minutes. For the ROG Ally, I ran the same exact test on the turbo setting, which is 25 watts, at 15 minutes of racing on Forza Horizon 5. Instead of 800p, it was at 720p on medium settings with the screen at 100% brightness, and the ROG Ally went from 100% down to 71% in 15 minutes. Now, in this very simple and limited test, we ended up with a difference of only 5%. And that 5% could be that I drove in different directions or past different cars when I was playing Forza Horizon 5. But after a couple weeks of using the Legion Go and a couple of months using the ROG Ally, I think that this is fairly typical behavior. Obviously, what game you're playing is going to have a massive impact on how long the battery life is. And while the Legion Go does have a bigger battery, it's offset by the larger screen and higher resolution. I think that most people focus on the wrong thing when it comes to comparing different PC handhelds. Too many people are focused too much on power. Which one can run AAA games at the highest frame rates for the longest period of time? And while I understand why people might think that way, for me, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's true that both the Legion Go and the ROG Ally are more powerful than the Steam Deck. This is because they're both running AMD's custom Z1 Extreme chip. If you're looking to play your AAA games for hours at a time, none of these devices are going to do what you want them to. They're all going to be limited in frame rate or the amount of time that you can play them, unless you're just plugged into the wall all the time, and then it's no longer a portable. While the Z1 Extreme chip is in fact faster than both the Aerith chip and the Sephiroth chip, both of the Steam Deck chips are far better at lower TDP. I say all this because I want to emphasize how important it is that we live in a world of trade-offs. If these handheld PCs were devices that were plugged into a wall and hooked up to a TV, then I think the Z1 Extreme would be the clear winner. But that's not the case. These are handheld devices, and so I think that power is not necessarily the most important thing to talk about. I think the most important thing to talk about is the experience. So which device has the best experience? Well, I think that depends on which games you're going to be playing. If you're going to be focused on indie games that aren't pushing the limits of the hardware, then I think the Steam Deck is the obvious winner. But that doesn't mean it shouldn't be considered if you're playing the latest AAA games. Both the ROG Ally and the Legion Go will outperform the Steam Deck, but not for very long. You'll just run out of power. However, what if those games you want to play won't run on the Steam Deck? Perhaps the developers or the publishers aren't willing to update their anti-cheat software, or maybe you want to play a bunch of games on Game Pass, which you absolutely cannot play on the Steam Deck unless you install Windows or you're streaming it. So if you want to play Windows games, do you want to run them on the ROG Ally or the Lenovo Legion Go? Well, I think you're going to have to decide which features are more important to you, because the performance is roughly the same. For me, using Windows on the 7-inch touchscreen is a pretty terrible experience, but the ROG Ally has Armory Crate, which is much better than Legion Space, and you can actually launch your games from that pretty well. The software on the ROG Ally is a much better experience all around. But like I said earlier in the video, I'm fine using Windows on the Legion Go because the increased screen size means that I don't have to have that extra launcher. I can just use Windows the way that Windows normally gets used, like on a laptop or a desktop. But maybe the variable refresh rate on the ROG Ally is more important to you than the higher refresh rate of the Legion Go. I think that that's a question you can only answer yourself. I've said it on the podcast a bunch of times. I think that if you put these two screens side by side, ignoring the fact that they're different sizes, and ask people to pick which one is the VRR and which one is the higher refresh rate, I think people would get it wrong. People would not know what they're looking at. And while there are people that would absolutely be able to tell between these things, I am not one of them. I think that they both look great. And unless you're playing things side by side all of the time, most people, it just isn't going to matter. So whichever one has a quote unquote better screen, I think that's open to interpretation. I would have said that this is the best screen for me right up until Valve came out with the OLED Steam Deck, which surprised pretty much everyone. That screen is gorgeous, absolutely beautiful. So again, we move into this world of trade-offs. Do you get the Steam Deck OLED because it has the best looking screen? Do you get the ROG Ally for the variable refresh rate? Or do you get the Lenovo Legion Go because it has the biggest screen? I don't think that there's a right answer here, and I don't think I can tell you which one is the best, because each one has its own benefits and its own detractors. Now, I think if you are a mouse and keyboard gamer and you are looking to dip your toe into the world of handheld gaming for the first time, the Legion Go is a no-brainer. It has that mouse and keyboard thing that you're used to. You know what I mean? For me, it doesn't really move the mark because I am not that guy. I just don't play first-person shooter games or third-person shooter games with a mouse and keyboard very often, so I don't get excited about that feature. But it is a differentiator that a whole lot of people have been looking for, a way to play the games that they want to play in a portable way. And so for them, I think the Legion Go might be the right move. They can pick it up at Best Buy or Micro Center, try it out for a couple of weeks, and then if they decide that they don't like it, they can easily return it to the store, use the money to pick up the other one. Then you take the ROG Ally home, you try it out, you decide which one is better for you. But on the other hand, if you're a console first gamer looking to dip your toes into the waters of PC gaming for the very first time, then I think that the Steam Deck might be the thing for you. It's a very consoleized experience, and it doesn't feel like a PC. It feels like a console, even though it is a PC and plays PC games. It's going to offer you fewer problems as long as the games that you want are actually compatible with that system. But at the end of the day, this is a long way to go to say I don't think that there is a right answer for everyone. It all depends on what kind of features are most important to you. And like I said, no right answer, but I would love to hear what you all think. Which device do you like the most and why? Let me know in the comment section down below that like button. And if you enjoyed this video, you're probably going to enjoy this video right here. From the Nerd Nest, I'm Bill. Stay rad, everybody.